Quinnipiac, its polling is notable because Quinnipiac's polling has tended to be very favorable for the Democrats. In fact, if you look at the last couple of election cycles, the Quinnipiac polling tends to give the Democrats greater margins of victory than actually show up. They tend to lean Democrat just in their outcomes. I don't think there are some pollsters out there, Data for Progress, PPP, several others, that intend to be Democratic affiliated pollsters. Quinnipiac just happens to be that way. I don't think there's a nefariousness, a maliciousness there. They just are. And in Texas, a majority of Hispanic voters are now critical of Joe Biden. This is showing the trend line that has become a theme in the last few weeks of Hispanic voters in Texas are rapidly moving to the GOP. Something like 27% of Hispanic voters in Texas support President Biden's handling of the border. 27%. 27%. That's not good. But the more notable one is black voters. You could expect black voters to align pretty sizably with Joe Biden. Even in Texas, black voters are the core of the Democratic Party there in urban areas. In Texas, black voters tend to give Democratic Party politicians 70 to 80% support. 70 to 80% support for Democrats from black voters in Texas, which is lower than nationally. Nationally, black voters tend to give Democratic politicians 80 to 95% support. In Texas, 70, 80% support, though that's really good. Except Joe Biden's not there with them. Joe Biden is not at 65. Joe Biden is not at 60. He's at 56% support of black voters in Texas, according to Quinnipiac. Now, again, individual polling, you can't really pay attention to the numbers, don't put too much weight in the numbers, but the trends are consistent across polls. That Joe Biden's support is falling everywhere. By the way, this is one reason Republicans can't afford to dig their heels in on the debt ceiling. People don't like the Democrats. They're going to blame the Democrats for this. The other notable thing about the Texas polling is that it is also consistent with the Iowa polling, where Joe Biden's popularity is at 37%. And black voters in Iowa have turned on Joe Biden. And when I say turned on him, a majority of black voters in Iowa support Joe Biden, and there aren't a mass population of black voters, but there's still a portion of the voter percentages up there, and you need to understand that it's less than 80%. It had been 95%. White voters, overwhelmingly negative. Democratic voters in Iowa have seen a 15-point shift away from Joe Biden. Independent voters, he's underwater with them. He's underwater with Republican voters, obviously. But to see a 15-point shift in Democrat voters in Iowa for Joe Biden, that's not good. And Afghanistan is the number 2 issue. Afghanistan is the number 3 issue in Texas behind the border. And the number 1 issue in Texas is the same as the number 1 issue in Iowa. What is the number 1 issue? Ooh. You ready? Incompetence. Voters in Texas, voters in Iowa swing state, Texas not so much, but they're common themes, common trend lines. Incompetence. Incompetence is one of those. Incompetence. And when you've got Joe Biden rating as incompetent among voters in Iowa and in Texas, it makes you wonder. So I'm in Georgia. And in Georgia, Raphael Warnock is the incumbent Democratic senator. He won Johnny Isakson's special term, or won the rest of Johnny Isakson's term, so he's got to run again. He can't serve a full 6 years unless he wins this time. I haven't seen any significant polling. I imagine it's going to come. If Joe Biden is as unpopular in Georgia as he is in Iowa and Texas, if he's falling with Hispanic voters and black voters in Texas and Iowa, the trend lines nationwide show the same thing. It's got to have an impact on a guy like Raphael Warnock. And that actually helps somebody like Herschel Walker. Republicans have been a little bit concerned with him. They're still concerned privately with him. They just don't think they can stop him. But if the wave comes against the Democrats, that helps Herschel Walker. It hurts Stacey Abrams.